Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody's had some coffee before they came down. Okay, so we're talking about building data access hubs for innovations. About how, with Co-Strategics and Transdev, the largest North American transportation management company, built this to power innovation and analytics teams to innovate with data. This hub, I'm going to read this a second. This hub provides 3 access points for data, catalog, APIs for application integration, process organization, as well as data warehouse to access self-service reporting. And it governs and reports on data and metadata being transferred both internally as well as externally to vendors and third-party systems. Wayne, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Dwayne Thompson. I'm Senior Director of IT Delivery at Transdev. I've been in the industry for 28 years, all in IT, operational. We are the largest intercity ground transportation company in North America, and we're working on being the largest in the world. We're headquartered out of France, and we're bringing a lot of great things to the table in terms of innovating for our clients as well as people that ride the bus. We actually run the Cincinnati streetcar here, so if you're familiar with that, then that's one of the operations that we serve. Happy to be here. I'm looking forward to sharing the journey.
Matt Werman, Director of Enterprise Applications. Been working with Co-Strategics for 10 years. About the last 4 or 5 years, really working in the data space, working with Dwayne to bring forth innovative data products and solutions, not just necessarily in data, but also in data engineering. What new offerings are available in the cloud so we can really put forward a new, nice innovative solution. We'll talk through some of those things here today. Personally, this month is a bit crazy. I don't know how many of you have multiple graduations you have to prepare for, high school and college. So I'm looking forward to the end of May. It's only the second. There's a lot going on. Okay, moving on. A little bit about Transdev. I think you mentioned those.
I did, yeah. We're the largest private provider of multiple modes of transport. So we do a lot of fixed route, shuttle, paratransit services. We also do a lot of vehicle maintenance. And so we connect these communities. We're connecting people. That's what we're after at the end of the day. Non-emergency medical transportation, mobility as a service. I know that's a concept that has really been prevalent in the transportation market over the last few years. So for innovation and what we're thinking about is how we get toward that mobility as a service model. And the hub that we're going to show you here today is hoping to spur that innovation, that innovative thought, as well as actually bringing those thoughts into real life.
All right, Co-Strategics is a strategic technology consulting and implementation company. We bridge the gap between technology and business teams to build value with digital and data solutions. Our services include strategy and technology consulting, digital platforms, modernization, data intelligence, and innovation and product development. And I say one of the real benefits of working with Co-Strategics is the partnership we build for co-innovation. And that is why I'm here actually with Dwayne, so we can speak about some of this stuff that we've built together. So we're going to talk about agenda, so we're going to talk about what was reality like versus the vision in 2012, what's the reality versus vision today, and how we got there with what we're calling a data access hub. And then we'll speak a little bit to the future of innovation. So Dwayne, I think you're going to talk a little bit about what was it like back in 2012 with Transdev and how the company was working with data and trying to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I joined, it was actually First Transit at the time. We were recently acquired by Transdev. We had nothing, right, in terms of enterprise data. And one of the problems that they brought me in specifically to solve were, how do we begin to utilize data, the management information concept? How do we bring that corporately, and how, looking at a top-down approach in terms of how we manage our business. Everything was at 175 transit contracting locations. We had another 75 that were, vehicle service related. We couldn't get to them. We didn't understand, what they were doing. So some specific areas, right? So three business units, very different business models, different between fixed transit, paratransit, and shuttle. And then also the data was so siloed at that location, they couldn't get to it, and they couldn't make decisions as an enterprise on how to drive those efficiencies. So one of the things that we were tasked to do right out of the gate is, well, they asked the question, right? What do we do? And so we came up with the concept of, enterprise data warehousing. I mean, believe it or not, right? We've all been doing it for about 30 years or more, and they had none of that. So that was one of the biggest challenges, and we had a lot of disparate systems. So I think we mentioned somewhere, if it wasn't there, 7 time and attendance systems, right? So we were a company by acquisition, and that's how we grew, is by acquisition. We didn't do a great job of acquiring them into the enterprise model. So what we had to do is think about how can we stabilize that, and how can we get to the data that we need to drive efficiencies, increase those revenues, and decrease those expenses. That's what it's all about at the end of the day, right? So, single source of truth, talked about getting to an enterprise data concept. Management dashboards, they were so hungry for the dashboards. I remember the CEO of the company, right, came up and he said, Dwayne, I love to fly Delta. I want that Delta app. I'm like, man, what does that have to do with the dashboard, right? But really at the end of the day, I knew, hey, he's talking about just having access to information because he didn't get it at the time. There was nothing, right? And so well-defined KPIs, that's where we started. We began to basically analyze the business, and we brought in, and Coach Strategics has helped immensely with this, just understanding, what is our business, analyzing and determining what are those key performance indicators that we can use to measure our productivity, and that we can measure efficiency, and then also getting to that real-time reporting, right? So the business was really struggling. A lot of the work that they were doing was in Excel. They call it the war report, and I think it's because they had to go to war to get to it. But I think it also might have been a weekly activity report. I'm not sure, but it was bad, right? Because it took them a week to get to the data, and then by the time they were able to produce that data and take action on it, it was a week old. It was so stale that they weren't really effective in their decision making, especially as it came to clients that had. We've got a lot of clients that want that information today, or they want that change today. It was hindering our ability to do good business. So the vision at the time is it's all about data, right? So how do we get to the data? How do we get it to a place that we can use it? And then how can we use it to make effective and proactive decisions? Because everything was reactive at the time, but becoming proactive about what the business was doing. This looks a lot, I think I've seen a few of these before. This is, I think the one on the top right is actually a GM's desk from Chicago. This cat actually drove for us safely for 12 years. I'm kidding, but it was like this, right? So, data entry, everything was on paper. There was no standardization. I mentioned the 7 time and attendance systems as an example, and it was that bad. There were actually another 6 in Canada, and we were dealing with Canada at the same time. So 13 different time and attendance systems. What do you do, right? So driving that standardization. 2 of the things, my buzzwords for the first 4 years were standardization and best practice, right? So following best practice in the work that we do, the methodologies that we brought to the table, and then certainly standardizing and getting to single platforms, not just as far as access to data, but also our ability to support the business, right, from an IT perspective. There was no architecture for an enterprise data solution, nothing. I mean, literally everything was done on Excel at the time. Bespoke solutions. A lot of these systems sat at the locations. So as I mentioned earlier, in total, about 250 locations. We had servers of data that sat at these locations and really didn't have a great way to get to that data. We couldn't understand it. We couldn't aggregate it across these business units because the locations weren't speaking the same language, right? The locations were making decisions for themselves in terms of what good looks like. And we really struggled with that. So Excel and Crystal reports were prevalent throughout the environment, as you can imagine, 10 years ago. And then, there it is, the 7 different, 6 more in Canada. So I just use that as an example of what we were dealing with. So that's the 10 years ago story.
So moving on to reality versus vision today. So we're going to look through some of the products and some of the solutions that we have. Specifically, we have some reports talking about improving operational efficiency, providing visibility into the time and attendance, making more efficient use of non-driving time, forecasting staffing levels, as well as tracking safety incidents and SLAs. So you sort of see kind of what things were, things were before. In the upper right, you'll see nice tabular reports, look a lot like, I can't say crystal reports, that's a different system now. But lots of things that look like a spreadsheet. It's what the company was used to. And we wanted to work, as we worked together, we wanted to drive change within the organization.
And that's what the business wanted to see, right? When we talked about it, right? I'll never forget when we go into these requirements and these design sections, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, UX, UI, and man, we got a chance to really blow this thing out of the water. I said, no, Dwayne, I want it to look like what they've been using. I want it to look like Excel. And we're like, oh no.
It's really hard to see something, a KPI that's affecting your business right now today, that's in a 25, 50 long column table,
And it was
right?
that
That's
long,
impossible. And a lot of people would then use it. I admit, people use this and do this in Power BI too. They will download the data set in Excel and work with it there. We're trying to keep people up into the solution by driving that culture change, by providing KPIs that speak to action up front, and showing them the data they need. And between the two systems then and now as well, working on, like we talked about, aggregation and bringing it together, was trying to bring through that level of trust and that we have the data that is accurate, we want to go here and use it. In the previous system, the acceptance, the buy-in rate of using reports was low. Like you said, there's 300 location adoption rate.
Oh, and I think we had, after the first year of 250 locations, and it was primarily for general managers and up, so it should have been about 400 people. Our adoption rate was consistently around 37.
Right.
It was pretty bad. It was hard to use.
And as we move forward into the new one, now we have all the general managers, and upper level, the C level, and everything, using this data. Another example we have, this is talking about staffing and training, which is very important when you have operations. You need to keep vehicles and stuff on the road and moving. We know how hard it is for employment. And so these reports, but one of the main actions we wanted to do with these is provide that bedrock. Start building these innovative analysis solutions, by writing out this data to them so they see it and they're going to start asking and wanting that. And providing this cultural change that they can start seeing and thinking more than just simply tables in Excel, if that makes sense. So moving into one of our sort of the bigger examples. So the previous ones were how to get out of tables, a nice, pretty visual Power BI report, and that's good. And it's the same data, just visualized different. But this example here, kind of non-drive time, or queue time, or yard time. This is an example, you can see some of the notes there, that talks about how Transdev, how they're bringing in revenue. How do you protect that revenue source and maximize it for the most part? And the example here, this example is a really good example, is an airport shuttle. So Transdev has a lot of airport shuttle services they run, and for that, in order to generate revenue, to earn money, that operator and vehicle is going to be on the road servicing passengers. That's how they get the revenue. By the time the employee arrives, checks in, they have to go through the process to go out to the vehicle, inspect it, make sure it's correct, working. Sometimes just even walking there takes a fair amount of time. Inspect it and then get out the gate. That amount of time in there, if we could shrink and save it operationally, I didn't know part of that, just report the data. But if it could be saved, they could save $1 million for every minute saved. And so we worked once we had the first framework in place, we worked together to start pulling in data, start getting a little more into IoT data off of the vehicles. We needed to integrate together the time and attendance system, the geolocation data coming from the vehicles itself using a geotab, as well as maintenance system, understanding how the inspections work, and being able to pull together all these little pieces so we can see, okay, here's how much time it takes to walk, here's how much time it takes to pre-inspect, how long it takes to get out of the yard. We don't even care how long they're driving, because then we'll watch it on the back end to see how each segment occurs before they clock out. And so we can start seeing trends, either maybe how the depot is laid out, where the vehicles are, maybe that can be done differently. Or instead of, because I know there were use cases of a operator having to walk 10, 15 minutes just to get to their vehicle and get out the door. Let's save that time, let's get them out the door. Or maybe there's employees who are taking longer in a certain step, where that can be then more training to be reapplied and to work with them. And so this was a very effective report. And it provided not just C-level, the C-suite to be able to see what's going on. This was meant for the general managers themselves, so they can start taking action on their own, every day to sort of make an impact to the bottom line.
Yeah, and it drove an amazing outcome, right? So by being able to get to this data, and it's a combination of a couple of things, right? So it's the schedule of the driver, it's when they clock in and out in terms of their punches, or their swipes, right, into the payroll system. It's using ADL, right, so when the driver leaves the yard, and then also a few other metrics around when they begin some pre-trip and close their pre-trip activity. But it was so effective, right? And so that 1 million, we blew that out of the water in terms of actual savings.
That's the upfront goal, right?
Here's the goal. Well, that's what we knew. We knew 1 million, or 1 minute was a million to the bottom line for the organization. But this thing has become, it's over tenfold, right, in terms of what we've done to date. And it got so specific to Matt's point, right, that it's not just about executive leadership, but it's about that location management. They've gotten so specific with it, and it's become, they've gamified it to the point where locations are now looking at specifically where they park a bus in the yard, in the lot, to make it more effective to get out, right? Because we gamified it from one location to the other. And now they're all just looking at each other like, I'm gonna meet you tomorrow, right? I'm gonna get you tomorrow. And, but that's a real thing. Park this bus over there, because that's the one that goes on this, whatever it is, right? And so it's been, exponentially phenomenal for us, not just in terms of dollar, but then also for performance and efficiency.
We'll talk more about how this data all came together, the solutions that brought in. We have a couple more examples. The next one has forecast staffing models. All the previous ones, examples talks about looking backward. That's all historical data that we're pulling. What happened yesterday? What happened 5 minutes ago? This we started bringing in and combining historical data with future data. Start applying some ML models to look at the staffing models that understand how at each location, how they can best determine day by day what staff is going to be required. Because it's hard to get people, and in order to keep quality of service up, keep their clients happy, which are the municipalities that have hired Transdev, it's important to have the right people there. We don't want dispatchers, general managers having to get in the bus to go out, maybe not be familiar with the route and such, which then brings that down. So it works to keep the right people doing the job and to show them when it's not just weekends or it's the Monday after, but maybe even after payroll drops. And a certain percentage of employees may not be there, so we got to have people on standby. But also making sure I don't over-anticipate and have more people on standby than is necessary and pay more for those people to be there when they may not be needed. So this is more on the protecting revenue and making sure we have the right people, not just, and not too many people around.
I haven't heard too many stories lately about GMs actually having to drive a route.
That hasn't happened in a while.
I haven't heard that in a long time, but it was good. It was prevalent early on.
I know there's payroll revenue codes that talk about dispatcher driving, GM driving. I see those.
Oh, yes.
Okay, moving on. This next one, safety incidents escalation. So the risk and safety team, before we started working with them, they did a lot of work pulling out doing their own data. So I don't know, a lot of you may know or have worked for, or your job is you're a business analyst or some other sort, but really what you do is you're pulling data in Excel. You are doing data engineering and trying to figure out how to get your data best so you can get just that right chart and so forth. These teams were building out monthly business review meeting presentations and spending probably a good week or two trying to get the right data, trying to aggregate it in Excel, build PowerPoint presentations. And it's a waste of time because they need to be spending more time actually analyzing the data than trying to finagle it into what they need to do. So we work with them to automate the data, make it available every day. So we gave them back their hours and so they can actually do what they need to do. This team was sort of the start of, they were early adopters. When we had this data available, they saw the importance of it, how it could be useful for them, how they could then communicate it downward, and that they wanted to be those first early adopters of self-service reporting, that they could take it in and build reports faster than they could have given to me. This took a while. All the fun little covers and charts, because we had to sit there with the business teams and talk through requirements. What does this KPI mean? What does that KPI mean? And work through it, make sure everything's good. Where this maybe took 3 months to build and get right with the data engineering and report building, they could build it quicker, say maybe in a month or less, because they know the requirements, they know their end users. Or I had to figure it all out by talking to them and working with them. So they became sort of our leaping point into bringing self-service to the rest of the organization. Oh, and I think one of the biggest things is that we built this, and as we start talking about self-service, it's like it was built to die. It was built that eventually it was going to go away. And that's okay that it went away, because we want them using their data. We don't want them coming to us or the IT department and asking IT to build reports. We want them to build, get adoption, build it out, share with their teams, and be able to move faster than they would having to get into the whole process of project and requirements and testing.
It's my favorite part of the whole story, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I don't know that I really counted on, because the concept of citizen developers is really, it's new, right? And I've only been, thinking about it for about the last 5 or 6 years. The citizen developers or makers, right, as Microsoft, I think, is trying to call them these days. But being able to self-service, right, get the data to a spot. We're going to talk about this a little more here in a bit, I think, right? Being able to get it to a spot where we can catalog it, where we can govern it, right? Make sure the right data is in the right place at the right time for usability. And then also the big thing that we've got now with this is the data is the compliance aspect, right? And so we deal a lot with HIPAA. FOIA in Canada, CCPA, some of the things that govern the terms of what we have, can do with personally identifiable information, the way that we can store data, what we can and can't. And it's been phenomenal, right, in terms of just us being able to catalog and govern that, and then the organization using it, whether it's for self-service reporting through Power BI, but then also the Power Platform. So if you can't tell, right, we're a Microsoft shop. So the concept of Power Virtual Agents, Power Apps, right, and then using Power Automate or flows, in their everyday work life, but allowing them to self-service and use the same data that we're using at the enterprise level to enhance their productivity every day, regardless of where they sit in the organization, if it's at the level or at corporate. So that's one of my favorite stories, and that's the one we're going to continue to build on that concept.
We'll move a little faster.
Okay, let's go.
So how do we get there with the data access hub? What is a data access hub? Dwayne mentioned that we do build in Microsoft Azure, but as we're going to present today, it is a cloud agnostic solution overall of what components come together to do this. So it could be built in other systems as well. But Dwayne, you want to talk about the first the on-premise solution real quick before we get to Azure?
Yeah, we took out, and we actually we purchased a large ERP product, and so when I was there, we had this thing. It was shelfware at the time. We weren't even using it. We had purchased the licensing. We had everything that we needed. So we went after, and it was an on-premise solution. DW for data warehousing. I won't say the name, but you could probably tell by the stuff that I'm going to talk about here. Data services for data integration, right? Very straightforward. Limited capability in terms of what we can do, right? And so also not only was it difficult to find the right people to help build and maintain this thing, it was slow. It was so slow. And when we talked about some of those early stages of adoption, that had a lot to do with it. We weren't as nimble as we could have been or should have been. And we recognized that, and so we did. We did what was it, about 2016, 2017, and we came into a space that gave us a little more flexibility. We got away from the hardware. We got into the service model. I think we have one VM in the entire environment.
Right now, you're getting ahead.
Oh, I am? Well, you said go faster, so.
Yeah, go faster. Go a little too fast. Okay.
All right.
So we're talking about building a new framework to build trust within the organization. The idea is it's not just one team that's building a data warehouse. This isn't a data warehousing solution. We want to also be able to scale horizontally across technology and also build in the cloud. So the idea is it's all the data integrations, the data and the data management, data presentation is coming all together into one spot. So the data hub piece of this is exactly as I sort of described it. There's been a lot of talk about data mesh, data fabric and such, and this is sort of what I call a traditional data hub. It's a centralized data warehouse built with a traditional 3-zone architecture, which I can talk about more later if you're not sure what that is. This is built with Azure AD for governance, as well as some internal application security to manage row-level security, column-level security within the system. And this data, it applies, as it's now coming all together, essentially governed, it's all the finance data, operations data, sales data, IT, maintenance, and safety, all coming together.
Are we still not talking about Zone 4?
No, we're not talking about Zone 4.
Okay.
Yeah. On the other side, so the data hub, we all sort of understand. We understand data warehouse solutions. We're going to get our data, we're going to transform it, pipelines and so forth, and get that into the solution. On the other end, we're talking about integration hub. This is where one of the leadership piece I'm thankful for Dwayne, he says everything that's going to happen in Transdev is going to go through this team. Yes, you're building out the data warehouse, but all the business critical interfaces, if there's something new coming, it's going to come through here. So we can then be greedy and take advantage of, there's an application being built, they need interface to the contract system, great. That's going to go through so they have available. But I'm taking that data and I'm putting it in the data warehouse. So as each new product or application is built within a company, it's added on to our warehousing solution. So as the interfaces are working, as data is being applied to all the other groups, it's being shown in the reports. Every team has access right now, seeing everything. The silos are starting to break down, not just in the reporting, but also in their integrations and how and who and where they're seeing everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and organizational change, I mean, this took a lot of organizational change too. It's not all about just building a place to put some data and report on it. You have to, it's a culture shift for an organization that came to, from an Excel spreadsheet to where we are today, 11 years later. So being able to work through that concept, to drive to see the business strategy and to be able to communicate that with your business teams, what they need from us, what IT needs from the business. Those are very important to understand and have those conversations. So it's a journey.
The last point there, I'm talking about providing, we also want to provide data backup. So the data warehouse, we can provide out those data models to Power BI and so forth. But we also provide out the same data models that have APIs. The same APIs and the data models also found in the catalog. So people doing self-service reporting, whatever they're looking at, they're seeing the same data across the system. So the application team, the reporting team, what is shown in an application corresponds to the report. It's coming together as we talk, breaking down those silos of the apple and orange model of things not matching. Everything's matching now. It's consolidated with common metadata. So like that queue time report, I can now match my geolocation data against my inspection data in the time reporting system, so I can see this driver is doing this at that time. We can really work on that. They can work on that in business to save money.
And those APIs, right, they're not just for reporting. We use them in all of our application development now. So, our applications are API backend, and it's everywhere. So.
This is a high-level sort of view of Wayne has named the Point Data Cloud, planning, operations, and intelligence and transportation. It's on the left-hand side, we have all of the systems that are coming in, all the TMS, vehicle assets, operational assets, coming into the system, making that available, through a sort of a three-zone of raw data, transformed analytical space, and then as the sense of that master of that gold data set. That has, and as Tori mentioned, this is built all in Azure, so we're using a lot of serverless technology. We'll see in our slide, I got some icons. And as well as governance and tools. But it's the right-hand side, where we have our reporting, the visualization, but we have all our applications tying into it too. Everybody's using the same data, as well as then discovery, talking about catalog and APIs. And also then back out to third parties and our partners. For instance, there's vehicle data. There's vehicle data in the main maintenance system. GeoTab has it. Those are tracking the location everywhere. And then there's a video coaching application. Being able to synchronize the data from hand-entered data across all three systems was key that this system was able to do, because we're able to take all those systems, merge and map it together, and synchronize them across. And so we're able to push out data quality as well as manage it internal to the data warehouse.
And it's authentication as well, right? So we can control authentication, and we can provide more security to the applications and tools we use at the end of the day.
So don't boil the ocean. This was a gradual evolution. Sort of starting through, this is a nice thing, a little more logical view. So we're starting out when 5 years ago, we needed to get represent time to value quickly. We needed to be able to get the data and start getting reports out immediately. We need to get away from those tabular spreadsheet looking reports, start visualizing this data, get it to the business. There's a number of pressures for why we had to do that, but we had to do that quickly. So the first part is really just your data engineering. Get that data warehouse stood up, get the reports out, let's get the quality of the data correct, accurate, on time, always there. So the business really is trusting, and they know they can come to it. They aren't questioning anymore. And as they start doing that, we start working towards the reliance on the data. They start asking questions. I talked about that queue time report. At the end of this phase, when we started really bringing it all together and it started becoming common, then they started asking. This is when we started building, we call this Zone 3, this model and serve, really putting in the self-service database. Self-service data sets up in the Power BI and API implementation. Every data object in the warehouse is represented for application development, which is also highlighted there, as well as the data catalog, which is always an ongoing process in working with the tools that continue to evolve. And it's an ongoing process, not just because the data is changing, because the tools keep changing. You keep providing more functionality to the end users. So application development is the first real big use, as well as self-service. And then from there, we're able to, like today, we're sticking on the data science labs, enabling more data science activities, as well as within Microsoft bringing in their Power Platform. So that's that Power BI, but also Power Automate. We're talking about the chat bots and Dataverse, if any of you are familiar with those pieces. And within this tool set, a lot of these services are, like Dwayne said, we have one VM. The VM exists because not every interface is easily accessible on newer technology out in the web. There are some systems that still require you to have a nice SOAP web service API call using their DLLs or something like that. And so sometimes we have to go down and write little old school console apps that are running on our task cron schedule somewhere. But everything else is up in the cloud. And if we need to replace something, we know that in the cloud, we can easily do that. We can easily replace a job, move it to a function app, move it into the Azure Data Factory, and so forth, or move our cloud or put them for a bid. Dwayne says, all right, I need you to scrap the data warehouse. You're going to go straight to Databricks. Right? We're going to build a lake house. Okay, just give me a moment. But it should be easy for us to start swapping out and adding on based on the sort of component model we have. Future of innovation. Okay, Dwayne, could you speak to this, please?
Yeah, sure. So, and what we've done, right? I mentioned NEMT, non-emergency medical transportation, is an up and coming opportunity for us as an organization. A lot of dollars in that business, right? So we do it. We've already come up with some concepts. The business is now coming to us. Hey, well, what does good look like? And so, what do we do with the Nemo Hub, right? And so now we've got the concept of being able to apply the same type of technology as well as utilize what we've already developed to spur innovation in those markets. And so now we're talking about connectivity with providers, right? So it's a broker model is what it is. So providers, mobile applications for consumers, what they can do to get in and out of that space. And then GXFS, and so if you've heard of there's GOFS, GBFS, GTFS, GTFS, RT, GTF, Flex, whatever. There are so many of these, I just call them GXFS, right? But the mobility as a service model, being able to take, so if you look at Google Maps, right, so you can see, you have the transit system that comes, well, they get that through GTFS, right? That's how that works. And so the concept here is, now I can take these GTFS models that exist everywhere, and for my scheduling product, which has always been the hardest data for me to get to, because a lot of the times we don't even own it, the client manages it, but we can use things like GXFS for anything from schedules, real-time events, bike share, for multimodal services, to integrate that into the space and use that as a back end to provide data for applications and services as well as reporting. So these two are major opportunities for us in the market. It's where transportation is going, and we've got a great model here with the Point Data Cloud sitting behind it to be able to work with innovation, our business innovators, and then use this technical innovation to go and get some of that market. So.
One thing I'll note is the NEMT is a application-based solution that can be powered by the data we have. The GXFS, that is both ways. We can either pull data that's publicly available, but also the data we have can easily then start generating data for those municipalities. So they can start offering that intermobility, interconnectivity, interoperability service for their transportation system.
It was hard.
IT innovation. So the IT innovation piece, this talks about things that we're providing inside. And when we look at what either the cloud providers are providing, or we see new services that can bring new opportunities to the business, that's great. But the other piece is our own engineers. Our own engineers want to keep learning. We don't have someone sitting on Power BI for 4 years. Well, actually, Power BI is a bad example because Microsoft keeps pumping out every month new updates. And if you're not watching their blog, if you're a Power BI user, you should watch their Power BI blog for this update.
SSRS, maybe. SSRS.
Oh, SSRS is the old one.
Yeah.
It's that.
That's what we're talking about, yeah.
No, but Power BI, or just, they always, within co-strategics, our engineers, we would call them Gixers. And one of the core values for our engineering team is the ability to drive to want to learn. And so as I'm watching what changed, as I reread the Azure blog or something, I see something new, I'm like, hey, this might be good. Go try this out, and we'll show Dwayne and see if he likes it. And that might be a really good opportunity to bring to business to either save the money, a new opportunity. How can we bring ChatGPT in? I don't know yet, but I'm thinking about it. And I'm hoping to present something there, and the team is looking at that too. Whew. Question? Thank you. 1 minute.
Sure.
Yeah,
Wait a minute.
No, go ahead.
In the back.
Oh, sorry. You mentioned a big piece of this was getting the data, and we're starting to collect and track these metrics. I was wondering if you found any overhead or costs that you didn't anticipate in just collecting that data in the first place. Were you having, people manually track what they were doing? Was it, how was that data collected, or was it?
There's a mix. So there is a large data entry component, and we have been working over time to try and automate some of that piece, but that is still there. But there is also a workflow along with that data, not just the data that's entered manually, but also the automated data. Someone still has to review and take a look and sign off. So when you talk about trying to get data out in reports in real time and quick, some data is not allowed to be shown until someone signs off and says, all right, this is good, I'm happy with it. So there is, I think, an unnecessary lag sometime, in that business process to see the data, approve it, and get it out there for the business to see.
Yeah, and we did see a couple of examples as well. So one, clerks that sat at the location were spending a lot of time to get to some of this data and be able to present it. That unfortunately was part of one of our early business cases, right, is that we could reduce that if they found other things for them to do. So, but we saw that was going on at every location, and that was a huge expense and time consumer that we were able to utilize those resources elsewhere. Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
Go on.
Sure. Yeah. Dwayne, you made mention of change management and struggles that the organization faced in that area, and I'm curious to hear about some of the struggles and some of the solutions, more specifically in the realm of getting not only executive level buy-in, but also team level buy-in within a data team or development team.
Yeah, good question. Process, right, at the end of the day. And, we walked into an organization that didn't have a lot of process, especially, it wasn't in the operation. In some cases, they had standard operating procedures and, they had some concepts of what they wanted to do, but we really began to shape it. I'm process driven, right? I have been since I started my career. I went into a process-oriented company, was where I first started, so I recognized the value of that. And I'll never forget, right, one of the first meetings that we had, I walked in and I gave this presentation about what we're going to do in terms of service management, service delivery, IT delivery, and then also the engagement with the business. And one of the VPs raised his hand and he said, so when are you going to come out to fix my printer, right? And so that mindset and I was like, I'm not going to, right? You're going to follow a process. And so just the process from anything from incident management to change management, the way that we communicate, right? Identify those risks, communicate the work that we're doing. That fed into the business. And the business now, right, has begun to, they have their own processes and they're becoming more mature in terms of the way that they manage their operation. So I would say that was probably the biggest driver at the end of the day, is recognizing that, processes are good. Yeah.
So in your gradual evolution architecture diagram you have,
Yeah.
does it provide the near real-time reporting?
It does for certain assets, data assets. For instance, we pull in a lot of data that comes from the vehicle. The geolocation data is pumped in from the solution via webhooks, so we get some real-time data from there. The data entry system as well, actually, as those were rebuilt, those are event-based, so as data is reviewed and approved, that is sent to us in real time so we can get that out in there. And most recently, we're implementing some changes. I don't know if some of you are familiar with how wonderful it is to get your data updated in Power BI. Working to try and make the refresh of your reports data-driven as well, and get those based on API. So we're trying to get the data out to those reports as soon as it's available. Does that answer, kinda?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, I can answer more later too.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the beginning, the number of systems that you had in the end, how did that reduction look?
We're at one now. For time and attendance. We're one of everything that we did. So it started with time and attendance, maintenance, we had multiples, we're down to one maintenance system. We had 2 ERP systems, we're down to one. Operational systems, those still vary by location, but that's the only one. For 5 years, the business heard me say standardization probably every day, and we worked hard to get